IVM.
Welcome to Police Chowki, a special limited series on your favorite public policy podcast, All Things Policy. This series will take you behind the khaki uniform, beyond the flashing red beacon, and into the heart of the functioning of the Indian police force. We cast a critical eye on the role and function of the police in the Indian democracy, from the silent persistence of paperwork and meticulous investigation to risky counterterrorism efforts and policing in conflict zones. We explore the need for police reform and accountability in the system. Each episode brings you a comprehensive exploration of a unique facet of policing, illuminated by the insights of a former IPS officer who has lived the life behind the badge. So join us every Monday morning as we take you into the complex world of Police Chowki.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Police Chowki. Today we're going to be talking about prison reforms and the state of prisons in India. I'm your host Shrikrishna Upadhyaya, and on the show today I have two special guests. We have Mr. Somesh Goyal, a former IPS officer and DGP of prisons in Himachal Pradesh. He has been credited with some remarkable initiatives in making a turnaround among the prison system in the state of Himachal. Welcome to you, Mr. Goyal. Very happy to have you on Police Chowki.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege.
And also with me, I have our guest, Mr. Javeed Ahmad. Mr. Ahmad is a former IPS officer and DGP of Uttar Pradesh. Welcome back to Police Chowki, Mr. Ahmad.
Good morning, Shri. Thank you for having me back, and a very warm welcome to my friend and colleague, Somesh Goyal Saab. Welcome, Somesh.
Thank you so much, Javeed.
All right, so let's start by talking about the history of prisons in the country, right? And we'll start with the colonial period because this is when the British started setting up prison infrastructure across the country because it suited their needs. And in back then, the design and regulations which were enforced in the prisons were influenced by the idea of this colonial rule of keeping control of inmates, of keeping people in check. And it was not necessarily about the reform and rehabilitation of prisoners. It was more to do with the confinement and punishment of those guilty as deemed by the British government. So I want to know from both of you. So has this colonial origin influenced the design of Indian prisons even today? And as far as our current regulations and functioning of prisons is concerned, are there still remnants of this colonial history of prisons, or has any effort been made to create modern prison infrastructure, a more habitable environment within the prisons, and more 21st century regulations for governing them?
Yeah, it's a very important question, Shri. You said whether there are any remnants of the colonial past. Of course, the prisons setup per se is predominantly colonial in still concept and the way it folds out. Prisons, modern prisons came with the British. And there were several ills, and as you know, that they were the colonial rulers, and the ruler would set up the prisons only for retributive purposes. So the prisons, when they were established by the British, were largely punitive in nature, retributive, and it was to discipline them and break their spirit, not any longer. However, demands for reforms started in the 19th century when the first prison commission took place and the prison committee asked for reforms. And after the prison conference of 1892, the first act, the act that still regulates the prisons, the Prison Act of 1894 was enacted. And it is not the only act that governs the prisons. There are two more acts, one of 1900, the Prisoners Act, and the Transfer of Prisoners Act in 1950. As we find that it was more retributive, things have undergone vast change. With the Nelson Mandela rules kicking in and more issues of human rights becoming predominant, I think India could not have remained unaffected. A lot of good work has been done in the prisons. The rules and regulations may be archaic, but there is a modern thinking now, thinking towards change, reform, rehabilitation. That is the care. There are a lot of drawbacks. We are yet to reach the level of advanced countries, but prisons have come a long way since then.
So you mentioned a Nelson Mandela rule. So if you could briefly elaborate what these rules were and how this contributed to a change.
These rules are very recent. The United Nations, since Nelson Mandela remained incarcerated for decades, so when the human rights of prisoners were enunciated by United Nations, then the Nelson Mandela rules, they were called the Nelson Mandela rules, and the attempt of the prison setups worldwide is to follow them and try to create humane conditions within the prisons.
Yeah, just to elaborate on what Mr. Goyal mentioned, the official name of the Nelson Mandela rules is the United Nations Minimum Rules of Treatment of Prisoners. And obviously, India is a party to that, as a signatory to that. And broadly, what the rules specify or lay out is that prisoners have to be treated with respect, with dignity, and values, and their value as human beings. That there should be no torture. That there should be safety and security of the prisoner when he is in the jail. There should be impartiality in the treatment of prisoners, and especially as far as women prisoners are concerned, their security and safety has to be given a lot of importance. It also talks about, since we were talking about the architecture of the prisons, it also talks about the kind of architecture that prisons should have. If I'm not mistaken, Rule 24, Rule 14 talks about the barracks having large windows which enable reading and the coming and going of fresh air, so that people can, read or do activities without artificial lighting. It talks about facilities for bathing. It talks about facilities for sanitary conditions in the toilets, especially in respect of women. It also talks about proper healthcare facilities inside the prisons. So these are broadly what Mr. Gold talked about as the Nelson Mandela rules.
Thanks, Javid, for supplementing that. And the health includes the mental health issues also, requirement of counseling and requirement of availability of specialist treatment also to the inmates.
Right.
If I'm
We'll come
allowed
to
to, sorry,
yeah.
if
Please go
I'm
ahead.
allowed to
Yeah.
mention about the architecture, the architecture has also evolved from the British period. I agree that most of the prisons, 99% of the prisons today, would be drawing inspiration from the British architecture of securing them and not providing care to them. But about 5 years ago, BPRND had held an architectural competition, and they have evolved a model prison drawing for all to follow. And I had requested them that it should be modular. You should, instead of giving one prison kind of a concept, you should provide a modular thing as the number of prisoners increases, so that the second part of a second module could be laid out. So I think they are working on that in that direction also. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic initiative, and it is much needed given how the old design of the prison in terms of barrack cells, anda cells, solitary confinement, and so on still continues today, and has become a subject of much caricature even in popular culture among movies and shows and so on. And there are these memes on social media which sort of talk about, oh, look, here is a prison from some Western country which is probably better than a 1 BHK in Mumbai or Delhi, right? So, in any case, moving on. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the under trial issue in the Indian prisons because under trials are a significant portion of the inmate population. These are people who are facing trial but have not yet been convicted. There is a lot of issue in terms of slow trial, slowness in the judicial procedure, lack of bail, so on, which has led to this under trial problem, right? And also, under trials contribute to overcrowding in the prisons, which brings with it a lot of health and hygiene and over prison management issues. Mr. Goyal, in your experience within a prison system, what have been the factors which has led to overcrowding, other than under trials, if any? And how do you solve for this issue? What are the initiatives that can be taken at a prison level to sort of address this issue?
Shri, I'll be very blunt. The role of prison department is very limited. We can only provide the band-aid. The melee lies in the judicial system or the way that justice is delivered. If two-thirds of the prison population today is of under trials, the fault is not of the prison department. Prison department is the holding department, and if you look at the national figures of cases pending in courts, they are adding whopping numbers of cases to the pending number of cases. So I personally, from my experience, I do not see, and I have written about it, saying that till the judiciary gets its act together, the normal is jail, not bail. Today bail, not jail. Supreme Court says bail, not jail, but the fact is it is jail, not bail, and there is huge pendency of cases. Till these two things are addressed, prison departments and governments will not be able to do much. And I have recommended, our president also said, where is the need for more jails? Sorry, there is immediate need for more jails. I said that 7% accommodation is being added every year, whereas the number of prisoners that comes to jails is nearly 11%. There is still 4% gap and 36% backlog. How do we do it? Not in my lifetime. Next 50 years, I don't see the problem. So what I had recommended, I again say, is that the government of India and the states, where there are 5 states which have more than 150% occupancy in jails. These 5 states need to get their act together, allocate funds, and modernization grant that has started from government of India for the next 5 years should be devoted only to construction of prisons. If we do not get into a mission mode, I don't see that the problem of overcrowding will be solved in any which way. Yeah.
Mr. Ahmed, yeah, would you like to add?
Yeah, to add to what Mr. Goyal has very correctly mentioned, I totally agree with what he's saying, that the problem of under trials is a problem of the courts. It is not a problem that can be resolved by the prison department. You see, what has happened is that there was a time in the 80s and 90s where the criminal jurisprudence in this country, highlighted by the very famous statement of Justice Krishna Iyer of the Indian Supreme Court, that bail, not jail, is the default. From that paradigm, we have now shifted to a situation where even the Supreme Court, even after recording that there is not enough evidence against the person who has come for bail, refuses to, or is reluctant to give bail. There are many high-profile such cases, whether it is Koregaon or Umar Khalid or many others. So this change in the jurisprudence of bail in this country is something that is at the root of the problem that Mr. Goyal has very correctly pointed out. And the mitigating work that has to be done by the prison department can only be done when more budget is given for construction of more jails, creating capacity, and also adding more manpower. But you see, we will always in this effort. Somesh very rightly said it'll take 50 years. I think we'll always be trying to catch our tails. We'll never be able to achieve that, because when bail is not given, even in cases which obviously deserve bail, this problem cannot be resolved at its root.
Right. Well, I'm actually yeah.
Sorry, Shri. I would also like to add that the role of legislature is very important. There are a number of acts where instead of incarceration, some penal fines could be imposed. So those things have to be looked after, like for economic offenses, like for bouncing of a check. If I keep a prisoner inside for a year, he costs me more than a lakh of rupees, and the value of check may be 40,000 rupees or 70,000 rupees. So incarceration is fine, and if you close down businesses, not allowing them to work, where would they get the money? Then it's only incarceration. So law has to be amended suitably. A lot of initiatives have been taken on the civil side by making offenses compoundable. So the similar exercise needs to be done under local and special laws. With the new criminal laws, 3 laws, uh, things will improve. But I am sure if the government of India looks at the local and special laws, we can achieve a lot. Thank you.
No, I think that's a great point that you make, because I see how the two problems are connected. And this is something we have talked about in the context of economic reforms as well, like how decriminalization of many, many offenses under different economic statutes will not only lead to a greater business environment, but like you pointed out, that can have an indirect consequence of, actually solving problems like overcrowding in prisons and so on. So thanks for bringing that out. While I'm in agreement with both of you that building more prison infrastructure is what we need to do in the meanwhile, but there is also the issue of day-to-day management of prisons in the context of this overcrowding problem, right? And I remember during COVID, during the initial stages of COVID, the Supreme Court actually gave an order that a lot of under-trial prisoners can actually be set free, because there was a huge scare of pandemic spreading within the closed environment of a prison, right? And this was shocking to me, one, because the fact that the problem is so acute that the only way you could resolve it is by giving them some exemplary bail. And the second being, of course, we were completely fine with letting all these people out in the society, which again either says these people should not be in there in the first place, or the fact that we are sort of betraying the trust of the society. So, in this context, I want to know what is like the health and hygiene situation in the prison. Has it improved? Has there been any initiatives to make this better, especially since the pandemic broke out?
Definitely. The health condition and the nutrition levels in the prisons have improved a lot from what it used to be. And availability of doctors has improved, but it's also a matter of concern that more than 30% posts of medical and paramedical staff lie vacant in prisons. Generally, the administrative department looking after prisons is so much occupied with the police problems that they hardly have any time for the prisons. Their expansion, because you want to provide better service to the citizens who are on the wrong side of the law. That is not happening. The medical facilities, doctors are not regularly available in the prisons. And so far as the availability of labs and other things is concerned, there has been a major problem that whenever the patients have to, or the prisoners have to be taken to the hospitals, either next date is given, some doctor is not available, their tests are not conducted. But I would say that I would quote from my example from Himachal Pradesh. What we did was that from the profits that the Har Haath Ko Kaam project generated, we set up clinical labs in all major prisons. We trained our warders from AICTE approved institutions in lab technicians' jobs. So we did all our tests, normal tests, in house, which vastly improved. And the spin off was that we started doing annual health check of our prison staff also. It was a revelation to them that so many had hypertension, so many were found to be borderline of diabetes and all. So it helped everyone. So some initiatives have been taken at the local level. Most of the states, unfortunately, do not have a 5-year plan or a plan as such to provide medical healthcare services to prisoners in a fixed time frame. That is a serious problem. And if we talk of the mental health, the counselors are just not available. It is not the psychiatric help, but we need counselors. There are a couple of states in the country who have few counselors, but no other state has appointed counselors, or counselors have not been sanctioned at all by the governments of the day.
Yeah, if I can add to what Somesh said, and those are very valid points that he's made. Uh, as far as the focus of the government is concerned, the focus continues to be on the security of the jail, and there's no better example of this than a circular issued by the government of India in 2021, which is under the heading of modernization of prisons. And the objectives, there are four objectives. The first one is a filling up of gaps in the security infrastructure. Number two is new security infrastructure. Number three is adding more, equipment like metal frame detectors and the frisking facilities, etc. And at number four is correctional administration and attitudinal change. So, if out of the four targets, three are related to security, and only one, which is the last one, is talking about attitudinal change and correctional administration, that gives a good idea about how the government approaches the whole problem. That's point number one. Point number two, about how the excessive number of under trial prisoners affects the possibility or the options available for the prison administration. It is very revealing that in the period 2018 and 22, the per day spend of the prisons on the prisoners, the per day spend was as low as rupees 17 in Uttarakhand. And this includes food, health, uh, everything, food, health, clothing, bedding, etc. Himachal Pradesh, which I'm sure this has improved when Somesh was there, was at rupees 38. Uttar Pradesh, where I have worked out all my life, has 51 rupees per day. Andhra Pradesh surprisingly had 579 rupees per day, and Kerala had 159 rupees per day. So out of the whole country, 16 states were spending less than 100 rupee per person per day, and with that kind of money to even provide food, basic food, they would be very badly stretched to do that. The third point I would like to make is about the counselors that Somesh was talking about. There's this system and provision for having visitors in jails. And now that was one forum through which people who were social service persons, counselors, and others could be inducted. They would be third party independent monitors of what is happening in the jail and providing services, for example, like counseling. Unfortunately, what has happened is that instead of visitors being people who are trained in such matters or are cognizant of such matters, this has become another arena of dishing out patronage. So instead of having professionals, people who have the right connections are being made visitors as some kind of reward for whatever they have done for those in power. So this is the environment that is prevailing, and that is the result. That is resulting in a situation where the under trial prisoners, especially, are facing the kind of problems that are causing so much, public outcry.
Thanks, Javed, for pointing out the very, very critical and important issue of visitors committees and oversight mechanisms. I will just elaborate here, but I'll take a minute now. What I have been advocating during all my tenures is that these committees, these general committees, whether headed by a sessions judge or by a DM or by some eminent personality, eminent within courts, those people, they don't serve the purpose. We need to have thematic committees headed by experts to visit the prisons. If it is food and nutrition, let nutrition some nutritionists or somebody connected with it go there and see what kind of practices, food cooking and procurement practices take place. If it is health, let people experts go. If it is security, let some a committee on security go and take care of things. If it is requirement of training of staff, let somebody do the TNA. Like in Himachal Pradesh, I found that ever since the creation of the state, till I took over, there was no security audit of any of the prisons. So that was the first time we did it, and we worked out requirements from non lethal to lethal, from access control, from personal body cameras and all. We did everything. So there have to be thematic committees if we really want these committees to be effective than just the eminent people.
Stay tuned to All Things Policy. We'll be right back after a short commercial break.
No, right. Thanks for flagging of that other important issue of oversight and how that is done. And there is so much scope for reform in that particular domain. There's this one other issue, one very critical issue that I wanted to shine a light on in this conversation, that is regarding human rights abuses within the prison system, right? And this is important as far as safety, dignity, and protection of rights of inmates are concerned. So there is also dimension. I mean, I would say there are two dimensions to this. One is the vertical, where officials are sort of committing atrocities against prisoners, and the horizontal dimensions where prisoners are committing violations against each other. So I want to know from you, Mr. Goel, in your experience, how prevalent are these sort of human rights abuses, particularly sexual assaults among inmates in a prison, and are there accountability measures? Has the situation evolved? Is there scope to do more?
Well, human rights violations from the institutional point of view are few. But in larger states, or where crime is organized crime and different crimes are more, I wouldn't rule it out. There is abuse of power, in abuse of authority in prisons by the prison staff. That, of course, it's undeniable. It's undeniable. And secondly, as it is said that everything has a price in prisons. Every facility comes at a price, be it a BD or be it a phone call. So that I wouldn't deny that also. That possibility is also there. But your larger issue that you are touching about, the sexual abuse is has been reported from the prisons. But unfortunately, in India, there is hardly any database. There is hardly any research undertaken in the prisons. So, in for want of data, I wouldn't like to generalize. Like in the US, look at the US, 80,000 people are subjected to some kind of abuse. In the UK, I mean, hundreds of people are subjected to this abuse. And all these countries, because there is research, there are surveys, uh, there is work done by the non-profits. So you get to know that it is happening, and the government is also taking their local governments or the federal governments are aware of this issue, and they are upfront with the facts. But here, First, the prison authorities would like to suppress these facts, won't like this to come to light. And for want of data, I think I would only say that yes, it is prevalent, but the extent is not known to anyone. It would be hazarding a guess that it is happening left, right, and center. So I won't hazard that guess.
Yeah, just to add to what was talked about by Mr. Goyal, as far as the human right abuse by the prison authorities or the prison staff is concerned, there's a direct linkage with corruption there. As was mentioned by Somesh, everything that you get in the jail or you are denied in the jail has a price. If you want to meet a visitor beyond the visiting hours, you can do it if you pay the price. If you want to use a telephone, you can do that if you pay a price. On the other hand, if you are not ready to pay the price, that even the basic things that are your fundamental right as a human being are denied. It could be preventing you from meeting your visitor on some pretext or the other. There are cases where the prison staff will quote unquote forget to take you to the court on the day your trial is listed in on some pretext or the other. There will be beatings for for reasons which are totally unconstitutional. Unfortunately, in UP, which I know slightly better, there have been even killings of under trial prisoners in inside the jails, and fingers have been raised about what was behind it and who was behind it. So even in a protected environment like a jail, if people are being killed, then it is a matter of concern. I mean, these may be obviously anecdotal, but it does flash a light on the kind of problems that exist behind the very opaque walls of the jail. The other issue that was talked about was about the sexual harassment. We have to acknowledge that sexual harassment happens not only with women but also amongst men. And once again, the opacity of the whole prison environment is one of the reasons why these things happen and they are not recorded, and anecdotal evidence is all that we have. And the answer, I suppose, is I go back to what I had mentioned earlier. And when you have professional and committed visitors, for which there is a provision, these issues could be resolved. This issue would also be resolved if the number of women in the amongst the prison staff is increased, so that at least theoretically the women prisoners would feel less threatened by such possibilities.
So yeah, moving on. So the couple of things that both of you flagged off really struck with me. One is the Har Haath Pe Kaam initiative that Mr. Goyal spoke about, and then the fact that there is a price for everything in a prison environment, right? And I want to sort of segue into the economic aspects of the prison, or rather talk about the prison economy, because it's a complex system that includes all sorts of different actors. There's a lot of money and items moving hand, and prison economy has been studied as a matter of interest worldwide, because it gives very good insights into human behavior and so on. Uh, of course, prison economy, I would say, can be divided into two aspects. One is the more formal economy, where there is, vocational training, paid labor, and so on. And the other is the underground economy, where, there is illicit exchange of goods, drugs, even cigarettes and BDs, and so on, right? So all of this sort of raises the question as to security and corruption within a prison. So I want to know from both of you, what is the prison economy like in Indian jails? Is it similar to what we have heard of in media and in pop culture and so on, or are there differences? And how does this economy sort of have a bearing on the rehabilitation of inmates within a prison?
My experience is that when you focus on rehabilitation, When you change the orientation of the whole department towards rehabilitation and care, the underground economy of the prisons shrinks. But what is the value of this per capita value of this underground economy? I don't know. As I said, it is there. The prison products are, I think, used by prison staff and officers free of charge, which is illegal. The rations that come for the prisons are also alleged to be siphoned off, and there is a premium on everything that a prisoner wants to get, whether it's a phone call or a video call with the family or meeting them or the lawyer or going out for on a false pretext to a hospital or something. Everything is there. But when we sat down and analyzed that what are the problems, people wanted to talk to their nears and dear ones. So my solution was allow every prisoner to make daily call to one number on his given 5 6 numbers that he's supposed to give. Let him make a call every day, and let him make a video call whenever he can, because we had very limited video slots. So whatever call we opened it, and we found that the incidence of finding mobile phones in the jails reduced in the case of Himachal Pradesh. But facilitating this, and then we allowed the family members to visit freely. I said, why should we deny anybody's family member coming to visit a prisoner should be allowed to meet? And we, in fact, we facilitated a lot of these things. And Maharashtra also has something called Galabhet, where they are allowed to hug the family members. So that's something. But when we looked at the tensions among the prisoners, then I found that 45% of the prisoners are the sole breadwinners. When I talked to them, and we did a survey in Himachal Pradesh, we realized that the biggest single reason for tension, for frustration, for depression among the prisoners was that they were worried about their children, their family. So then I realized that Vipassana and music therapies may be good, whatever be their value. But most significant thing is to provide a job to every single person. So then we conceived this concept of Har Haath ko Kaam, and we started skilling them. And it was not skilling from top down. We did a skill survey of all the prisoners, and we banked on that. We started doing it, and the results were amazing. In first year itself, there was 20-fold increase in the wages that we paid to the prisoners, and it went up to nearly 100 times in a 5-year period. So when they started getting money, the conflicts within the prisons, conflicts with the staff, conflicts among the prisoners, these conflicts came down, and they were happy that they are able to contribute. I mean, a prisoner, we in Himachal pay at the government's minimum dihadi rate. So a prisoner who is willing to work would earn around 10,000 rupees a month. There are prisoners who are earning 10,000 rupees to a lakh of rupees a month in Himachal prisons. And 7% of the total prison population, we have found them jobs in the industry and in the market. They go unescorted to work in these business establishments and report back in the evening. The best was that in those 5 years, we noticed there was not even a single person who ran away. They put so much of premium. They value their freedom so much, and they value that this is their chance of reintegrating with the society, working as a normal person, with the only difference that they have to come back to the prison to sleep. So we look at this, the whole bunch of activities are taking place for their rehabilitation and to provide them wages across the country. It's not only Himachal, across the country. And the prison turnover, if you look at some of the figures, runs into hundreds of crores in the country. Yeah.
Yeah, this brings me to the concept of open jails. Open jails have been established in various states of the country, including Uttar Pradesh, and I'm sure what Somesh is talking about also is a kind of open jail, where the prisoner, reports at sunset and goes out in the morning for work, and he comes back every day. And in the course of the day, he's kind of integrating with the society in terms of doing economic activity or meeting his relatives, and in the process, it's a phase through which he goes and finally integrates with society once he's let off, in case he's let off. So the takeaway from this is that there is a substantial scope for increasing the number of open jails across the country. There is also a requirement for identifying or creating, parameters on the basis of which people can be put in the open jails. And this should be something that is transparent. It should be well known. It should be monitored, and it should be regulated, so that this does not give rise to another set of problems of bias and subjectivity, etc.
Javed, with a caveat, the open jails is a good concept, but where I differ from rest of the people in the country is that I say no special open jails. When you open a particular jail, let's say in Uttar Pradesh, all the prisoners who are eligible are sent there. That becomes a problem. The family is uprooted from their roots. They belong to a district. So what I did in Himachal Pradesh is that in every prison we created a block meant for open prisoners. And the second change that we did was that earlier these open prisoners used to go and find job for themselves.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, I made it the responsibility of the jailer to interact with the captains of industry of the district, of that town, to find jobs for them, so that we knew the establishments where they were working, whether they have reported or not, whether they have started back from the establishment for the prison or not. So it worked beautifully. And in fact, in a shoe factory in one of the districts of Himachal Pradesh, the entire shift, including the shift manager, is from the central jail. So that is the kind of work we could achieve.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And particularly because I think your approach sort of went ahead and fixed the right incentives for prisoners, right? I mean, for something as
Yeah.
basic as a phone call or visitation rights, I believe there is no reason why a black market should exist, because these should be, I mean, a basic right of any prisoner as far as I see it. In any case, thanks for elaborating on these aspects of prison economy and how giving them guaranteed work at reasonable wages can make such a big difference, particularly because many of them are breadwinners, the sole breadwinners from the families that they come from. Moving on to the last leg of this discussion, I'm having.
Can I just ask Somesh one question, Sri?
Sure,
Yeah,
Mr.
the
Ahmed, go ahead.
question that comes to mind, Somesh, obviously, is why these initiatives that you, for example, took in Himachal, and there would be others who've taken such initiatives in other states. Why have they been not replicated in different areas? I mean, this is a problem not only in prisons but in the police also, as we know. But how do you think this works, and what is the solution, Somesh?
Javid, you know that I'm extremely in such matters. One, I was the DGP of the state. I was posted as DG prisons. straightway you feel that you have been sent to Kalapani. So most of the people believe that their retirement starts from now, a paid retirement starts. I blame I blame the top leadership for that inertia. You look at any prison manual, the budgets of any prison department in the country, there is no separate budget head for rehabilitative work in the prisons.
Correct.
There is nothing. So the governments are to be blamed. For 5 years, I saw the minister in charge of prisons had no time to review the prison department. So that is the kind of involvement departments have. And, we have documented. I organized 2 or 3 national level conferences in Himachal for prison heads. We produced a beautiful coffee table book on Har Haath ko Kaam. By the way, Javed, this is being replicated, whether it is our in house radio station that we run, operated by the prisoners, whether it is the kind of work that we do and allowing people to go outside and work and finding them jobs. It is happening, but it is happening at the individual's initiative.
Correct.
The model prison manual of 2016 lacks in those things. And unfortunately, the Model Prison Act of 2023 also lacks all these things. It was an opportunity for this Model Act to include human rights, like there is no chapter on the human rights and duties of prisoners. Whereas the NHRC had included that in the draft that they prepared. So there are a lot of gaps, but still, I would say that slowly and gradually, one step at a time, we are moving in the right direction. We have our own problems: limited staff, limited budget, disinterested top leadership, and the administrative department. So you have these problems, but let's hope. But still, it's improving. Thank you.
Right. No, this actually brings me to the last leg of discussion I wanted to initiate with both of you, which is regarding legal reforms that this prison space definitely needs, right? And this, I think, should start with the prison manual. Like every state has to create a prison manual, and this is done at a federal level because prisons are a state subject. But prison manuals are riddled with problems. These have not been updated, although there is a model prison manual, like Mr. Goyal mentioned, but a lot of states have just not taken the effort to change them. And one of the most egregious things that I found was a research of a study of prison manuals across the country found that the work allocation within prisons, say cooking, cleaning, hair cutting, so on, is done on the basis of the caste of the prisoners, right? And this is actually not just an informal practice, but this is hard coded into the text of the prison manual itself, right? That this has to be done on the caste of the prisoners. So in this sort of situation, I'm sure prisoner manual requires a lot of upgrades. So maybe if both of you could talk about 2 3 reforms that definitely needs to be carried out in the rules that form part of the prison manual.
Well, Shri, like some good provisions are not followed in the good codified provisions are not followed by the prison administration, bad codified provisions are also not followed. Like cooking by a particular kind of community, or barracks divided on community basis. It doesn't work. The Britishers did it. Nobody bothered to remove those clauses. Fine, but these are not operative. I mean, you will always find some non-profit, some people interested in picking those things out without realizing what happens on ground. So I would say there could be instances where some in certain prisons or in some back of beyond areas where the prison administration is totally casteist. They have done it. I have not come across even a single instance or a single complaint of this kind in any of the prisons. So the very good. It has been pointed out to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court has asked for a report on this. So these provisions will be struck down. So that's fine, but these are not being uh, being followed in the prisons. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, to add to what Somesh said, when we are talking about the legal rights of the prisoners, I would like to highlight the need for better legal aid to the prisoners. Legal aid, as you know, is a fundamental right that every person or every person who's been incarcerated has should have access to. Unfortunately, the arrangement for legal aid at the district level or even at the state level uh, is not of the kind that can reach the most vulnerable of the people who are in jail or who are in need of free legal aid. I mean, unfortunately, there are also cases where, in a particular kind of case, lawyers whose duty it is as officers of the court to defend a person before the court, they refuse to appear in that matter. I mean, that also happens. So I think providing legal aid, free legal aid to those who need it, is one essential reform that is required. It should be not only on paper, but in actual practice. The other thing is that there are also instances because you have to also at the same time remember that a lot of those people who are in need of legal aid cannot afford to get legal aid by paying for it. And getting legal aid for money is an expensive business. And once they've lost out on their livelihood, where do they get the money for it? The other thing that happens quite often is that even if a person has been granted bail, he does not have enough resources to post bail in terms of having to give security and surety and all that. So I mean, these issues need to be the focus of reforms that we are talking about, and the new jail manual that is under preparation should look at these issues. The last point that I would like to mention here is about people who have been in jail for a long time, and I say this with personal experience, having visited a few jails in Uttar Pradesh. There are substantial number of people who've been in jail for a long time and who've been kind of disowned by their families. They have nowhere to go to, so that tomorrow, if that person was to go out or be released, he has no recourse available. And such persons are not only have mental health problems, but they are people who have the highest chances of recidivism, of getting back into crime, because they have nothing to go back to in society. So these are certain areas that the prison manual should look at and address. And I'm sure civil society organizations, non-profits, etc., have a reasonably important role to play in this.
Right. So I sort of have come to the end of this discussion, but before we end, I want to ask Mr. Javed if you have anything to add.
Yeah, closing thoughts. I think point number one is that the criminal jurisprudence of this country has to take cognizance of the result of their position as far as bail is concerned on people who are suspected and are arrested on the basis of suspicion and have to spend long years and months in jail. I think the earlier position of bail not jail was more conducive to the kind of society that we want India to be, where there is respect for human rights, and there's respect for a person who may be suspected of a crime but is not really, convicted for that crime. I think that is something that is at the root of many problems of the prisons. Secondly, the running of the prisons right now is more a regulatory, punitive kind of mindset, including the mindset of the government, where the attempt is to ensure that anyone who goes inside the jail is put to such rigors that he does not run away and does not have access to the outside world. I think that mindset also needs a review, because if reformation is the declared aim of the prison system, then it should reflect in the policies of the government, and also in the way the prison staff is trained and monitored. And for that, I suppose the involvement of third party independent professionals through visitors and others should be not only welcomed but encouraged. Lastly, I would say that giving skills or upgrading the skills of those who are in the jail, so that once they come out, they can integrate better with society in terms of economic activity and social, in social interaction. That should be another focus area for prison reforms. Yeah, I think broadly, if we can do these, we would have done substantially better than what we are doing right now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ahmed. Thank you, Mr. Goyal, for joining me on this conversation. It was enriching for me and I believe for all our listeners. So thanks once again, and see you again on Police Chowki.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.